We're now going to move from the poultry sector to the pig sector for our next two presentations. And I'm very pleased to introduce you to Georgina Crayford, who is sponsored by AHDB Pork. Georgina is a senior policy advisor at the National Pig Association, where she's responsible for a number of policy areas relating to pig health. She has a PhD from the University of Liverpool following her research on salmonella in pigs, and she describes herself as a bug geek. Her topic focuses on how to reduce antibiotic use in pig production, and she's particularly interested in ways in which to engage farmers with antimicrobial stewardship and a drive to positive behavioural change. Georgina.
Good afternoon. I'm going to start by telling you something about myself that you wouldn't know just from looking at me. And that is that I have quite a large tattoo on my leg. Don't worry, I'm not going to show you. And it is relevant, bear with me. It was inspired by this drawing from Lewis Carroll's book, Through the Looking Glass. In the book, the Red Queen takes Alice by the hand and they begin to run. Faster and faster they run, until eventually they come to a stop. But to Alice's surprise, they're still in the exact same spot as they were before. The Red Queen turns to Alice and she says, "Here, you see, it takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place." This line is really important to me, enough for me to have a tattoo inspired by it on my leg. The line forms the basis of a theory of evolution known as the Red Queen hypothesis, which proposes that species must constantly adapt and evolve in order to survive. Bacteria are rather good at adapting to survive. Even before humans discovered antibiotics, they were adapting to develop resistance against the antibiotics they were experiencing in their environment. However, the overuse and misuse of antibiotics in both human and veterinary medicine is accelerating the rate at which bacteria are developing resistance. It has been estimated that by 2050, there will be 10 million human deaths per year due to drug-resistant infections if nothing is done about antibiotic resistance. That is more deaths than are currently caused by cancer. It is a bleak thought. In the UK, the livestock sector that uses the most amount of antibiotics is the pig sector. And so, we've been in the headlines a bit recently. However, the UK pig sector has committed to reduce its antibiotic use by 62% by 2020. And in the 2 years since I began my Nuffield travels, they have reduced their antibiotic use by more than 50%. So, job done. Perhaps I didn't need to do my study anyway. However, it could be argued that these reductions have largely been achieved through harvesting the low-hanging fruit. And the challenge going forward will be in making those last further reductions and then sustaining low use in the long term. I set off on my Nuffield travels in the hope of finding inspiration for how we might be able to achieve that. And what I learned is this: there is no need to reinvent the wheel, but there is a vital need to consider and optimise the behaviour of the people operating the wheel if it is to turn smoothly. The management and hygiene practices that deliver good control of disease and improved pig health are already well established. They were summarised in a 20-point plan back in 1999 by a French veterinary epidemiologist called Dr. Françoise Madec, following extensive trials on commercial pig units. Indeed, many farmers that I met with during my Nuffield travels cited these practices as the reason for low antibiotic use on their farms. However, these practices are not very well implemented on UK pig farms. There are a number of reasons for this, one of them being that for many years, antibiotics have masked an array of disease problems, leading to a lack of focus on preventing disease in the first place. So, I became interested in how we might get farmers to implement these practices more widely. When I was in Australia, I met with a vet called Peter Mackenzie. He is a really strong advocate of using these practices to improve pig health rather than over-relying on medication, or health by stealth, as he has cleverly coined it. He explained to me that a challenge he faces with his clients is in getting the farm staff to implement the practices consistently. He's learned over the years to deliver his recommendations just a few at a time and letting those bed in with the farm staff before moving on to the next set of recommendations, rather than overwhelming them with a long list of actions that are never going to get achieved. And we talked a lot about change management, which I'd heard of before, but I've since found this quote which really nicely explains why change management is so important. Plans themselves do not capture value. Value is realised only through the sustained, collective actions of employees who are responsible for executing and living with the changed environment. There's no need to reinvent the wheel, but we do need to think of the people operating the wheel. An important way of getting people to behave differently is to help them understand why they need to change. Therefore, those of us that are trying to encourage farmers to use antibiotics more responsibly needn't rely on statistics like this, saying that there will be 10 million deaths per year by 2050, as I did earlier, simply won't work. It makes the problem sound too large, like climate change. People struggle to see how it will impact them personally or how their individual actions will make a difference. Therefore, those of us explaining to farmers why they should reduce antibiotic use need to explain what's in it for them. This was suggested to me by a man called Rob Moore, co-founder and director of an organisation called Behaviour Change. He explained to me that actually potential losses resonate more loudly than potential gains. So telling a farmer that there will be using too many antibiotics on their farm could result in some diseases becoming untreatable and therefore an increase in pig mortality is likely to hit home more than telling them they could save money by using fewer antibiotics. Framing the problem in a different, more personal way can therefore help farmers to understand why antibiotic resistance, amongst all the other things that are vying for their attention, should be made a priority. And there are other behavioural nudges that can be used to encourage people to behave in a certain way. One such technique makes the most of the fact that people tend to behave according to social norms. People will instinctively try to avoid being in the minority. After all, there's safety in numbers. Therefore, explaining that most farmers are doing something in a certain way can be a strong nudge in the right direction. And I wanted to share with you this example of social norms behavioural nudge theory in action. I found this in a park in Tunbridge Wells, back at home in Kent. And for those of you that can't see it, it says, 9 out of 10 dog owners clean up after their dog. Are you the one who doesn't? Once we have successfully got farmers to understand why antibiotic resistance should be made a priority, the next thing to do is to ask them what they think they could do to use antibiotics more responsibly on their farm. Because a key way to get people to change their behaviour is to make them think it was their idea. For example, if I told you to go back to your hotel room tonight and sleep on the other side of the bed to what you usually do, chances are you wouldn't do it. We are creatures of habit. But if for some reason you thought sleeping on the other side might give you less back pain and you might have a better night's sleep, then you might be more inclined to try it. With this in mind, researchers at the University of Bristol are advocating the use of farmer-led groups, which bring farmers together to discuss current and topical issues through discussion and participation, rather than using the traditional top-down style approach to knowledge transfer. This participatory approach makes the most of the fact that there's already a vast amount of knowledge and expertise amongst farmers. The group approach simply brings them together so that they can focus on an issue, decide what they need to do, learn from each other, and importantly, to hold each other to account. And there's evidence that this approach works. Lisa Morgans at Bristol University brought together groups of dairy farmers to talk about how they might be able to reduce antibiotic use on their farms. Each of the farmers came up with an action plan with the help of their peers, and by their second meeting, the farmers had, on average, implemented more than half of the actions that they had committed to do originally, which is an amazing success rate. Therefore, a key recommendation of my report is that organisations delivering knowledge transfer to farmers, such as AHDB, need to radically change the way in which they engage farmers and drive behavioural change. Remember, there is no need to reinvent the wheel. We already know the practices that deliver good pig health. But there is a need to think of the behaviour of the farm staff implementing those practices to ensure that they are delivered consistently and to a high standard. Change is really hard, and sometimes it can take all the running you can do just to keep in the same place. But if we fail to help some farmers to run, to evolve, then we risk some of them becoming extinct. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Nuffield Farming Scholarships Trust for selecting me for this opportunity. Thank you to AHDB Pork for sponsoring my scholarship. And most importantly, thank you to everybody along the way who met with me, hosted me, and supported me. Thank you.